for this first interview of some influencers in the fitness arena. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule for this. Let's start with training. It looks like training has been going really well for you lately. So how are you feeling these days, and how do you feel your training has been going?
Yeah, sure. So training for me has always been consistent, which is a good thing, right? Never really dealing with any major setbacks or injuries, especially as I get older. I think part of that is just attributed to smarter training.
Yeah,
So in some cases, less is more, as I'm sure you can probably understand and relate to.
most
As
certainly.
far as my own personal training going right now, though, it's going great. I'm running the Juggernaut AI app, as I've been kind of very vocal about on my channel. But I really like kind of the balance that it gives me and kind of adapting to what I need when I need it, and also listening to feedback when I tell it to kind of pump the brakes a little bit. So training is going fantastic for now. But I always tell people training is always going well until it's not. So that's one of those things.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. I'm definitely excited to try the app myself soon. All right, so how long have you been weight training, and how much of that has been consistent training for you?
Sure. So you're going to make me date myself a little bit. So I've been training probably since I was 15 years old. Around then, started for sports in high school, for basketball specifically. And at that time, it would probably have been 1995, 1996-ish, around when I started training. So that puts it at about 25 years now. I want to say, if my math's right, I'm 41 as of right now. So
Okay.
been quite the time frame. And I would say it's always been really consistent. So as long as I can remember starting to train, I've been in the gym at least, 4 to 5 times per week, every week, with obviously a few breaks here and there for just like back in the day, I would just take a week off versus now getting into like a deload. So just a reduction in intensity and volume.
All right.
But yeah, really super consistent, but it's trained a lot, right? Because when I first started training, to be honest, it was all kind of about the beach workout. So a lot of chest exercises, a lot of biceps exercises, not a lot of leg training. And
Yeah.
luckily, in my older age, all of my leg training has been more of my focus. I really enjoy it probably more than I do bench press at this point. And luckily, I've been able to catch up and not lose too much ground in that sense.
Well, that's pretty good. But what was your focus back when you began training, and what were your goals at the time?
Yeah, sure. So obviously for me, my big focus has always it's always been rooted in strength. Strength has always been something that's really interested me, even before I started, actual weight training. So maybe just push-ups or just playing around with my friends. I had an older brother who would always try to pick fights with me. So I always like to kind of hold my own. So strength was always kind of top of mind, but obviously in like high school and in college, especially even with sports, I think a focus of that kind of shifted to bodybuilding style training. So the aesthetics, the looks and whatnot. And I enjoyed that a lot. But after I left college and graduated, got a real job, didn't really have like a competitive outlet anymore. And even though I liked being in the gym, as we just talked about being consistent in there, just the bodybuilding and hypertrophy style training just wasn't as enjoyable as it used to be. Felt like I was just kind of spinning my wheels. And it wasn't until I started getting into some other programming, namely like things like 531, also a training style called dog trap training, which was made really popular back in like the late 2000s. So before 2010, probably like 2008, 2009. And I found that strength training specifically through powerlifting really let me kind of scratch that competitive itch that I found was missing in my normal training. And then also working up to an actual powerlifting meet, right? Gave you a goal. I wasn't someone who was going to step on a bodybuilding stage in a pair of briefs. This wasn't my forte, and no shame to anyone who chooses to do that. But having a goal in mind and having an end in sight to a training cycle and a purpose for a training cycle has really kind of kept me going and kept me engaged in my own training.
Yeah, well, I can relate. Back when I started, it was bodybuilding focused as well. And in my 20s, I actually used to refer to an image of Dolph Lundgren as a motivational aid towards my training goals. Did you have someone similar who you looked up to, real or fictional, and used as a visual reference for your own goals?
Yeah, I think Dolph was always a good one for me, especially going back to the Rocky series, but also because he was a little bit taller in regards to when you see bodybuilders, usually you're talking, like under 6 foot. And I think Dolph Lundgren's around 6'1" or so. But for me, it was always, and I think for most people that were my age, probably, Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Like I
Yeah,
love those 80s actions movies, from Commando to Running
yeah,
Man to Predator to even Last Action Hero, which was a
yeah.
comedy, but Total Recall. Anything that Arnold was in, that was kind of my dude. I really looked up to him in that sense. And obviously, when I was getting into training and the bodybuilding side of things, I think a lot of people before the internet would buy Arnold's Modern Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding. So I think that was a really popular book and one of the only ones you could really readily get anywhere. So I think he was a big icon and still is to this day, even in his older age.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I definitely looked up to him as well. He was always in the magazines, always winning competitions. Definitely someone who probably everybody in the bodybuilding world looked up to at one point or another. One thing I read of his in his book was about calf training. I remember him talking about having difficulties with that and stating something of an obvious fact where each step we take, we lift our own body weight. So if you're not doing heavy weight, you really can't expect your calves to grow. And that just kind of turned the light bulb on for me and made sense. So since that point, I kind of made sure I hit calves with heavy weight.
I always remember there's pictures of him back in the old gold gym doing like donkey calf raises, like 3 dudes sitting on his back.
Yep.
So yeah. But that being said, to your point, I still don't train calves.
Well, I noticed with powerlifting, we get plenty of training in there. Sometimes I can see it from the footage, but yeah, I'm still not a fan, but I try to hit them from time to time.
Yeah. You got to prioritize what you have time for. And for me, that's low on the totem pole.
Exactly. Yeah. So were you successful in achieving the goals that you set for yourself back then, or has it been something that's a constant work in progress?
So I think yes and no. So when I was in high school, we went to a very big football high school. Like that was the thing. Like if you were on the football team, that was the thing to do. Bunch of big, strong dudes all went on to play like D1 college, stuff like that. And our high school also offered weight training as like a gym class. So you didn't have to take gym necessarily or other electives. You could elect to take a weight training class, which I did for the 2 years it was available to me. And as part of that, the football team had this 1,000-pound club, right? Between your squat, bench, and deadlift, if your total lifted ended up being 1,000 pounds, you get your picture on the wall and all this. And I always thought that was really cool. Mm-hmm. That was always kind of a goal that I was chasing for a long time, partly due to the fact, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't really train a lot of legs, so my squat wasn't really there. I didn't really deadlift a ton back then, although I still did. And in fact, when I first started deadlifting, I actually pulled sumo, which I do not do anymore. I'm a conventional puller, but that was kind of always something I had aspired to. And then I hit that goal. And right now I'm chasing more of a 1,600-pound goal. So it's one of those things though, where I've adjusted my expectations as well. I don't go into it thinking, hey, here's this huge number I want to hit. I just try to add, 5 pounds to each of my max lifts if I can. And if I can do that consistently over time, then that's a win for me.
Yeah. 1,000 is a lofty goal for a high school kid. 1,600 sounds pretty incredible. I know looking at some of these guys now where they're achieving 2,000 is just insane.
Well, that's one of the things. And I think that's one of the things that's helped me a lot too in my own training is someone who's heavily involved in like social media. And I follow a bunch of lifters and a lot of my close friends are, national and international level lifters. One of the things I like best about strength training, even though it's very easy to compete against someone your age, your weight, whatever the case may be, the biggest competition is always really with yourself, right? Trying to push those numbers forward. So even if you're not the best in the world, if you can improve upon what you did your last competition or your last time you tested out of a training cycle, then that's still something that you can compete with yourself on. And I think still very rewarding.
Yeah, certainly. So it sounds like there's been a shift in training styles for you from bodybuilding to powerlifting. Are you pretty satisfied with that direction for yourself now? Is that what you see yourself sticking with?
So I think yes and no. I think in terms of my training and my enjoyment, yes. I mean, I've tried to go back to even like a mix of power building in the past, but I really just like squatting, benching, and deadlifting and doing those as frequent as my body allows me to do while still progressing and staying healthy. So I don't think there's going to be a change. The biggest downside is even when I first started my YouTube channel, it was still mainly in bodybuilding style training, and people do not let me forget that I used to look like I was bigger, which that's fine. When you train for hypertrophy, typically you do look the part a little bit better. However, I am much, much stronger and I will take that these days. So
I can agree with that. I actually did a little research looking back at some of your older videos today, and I could agree with the appearance aspect of it. And it was similar for me too, back when I was training many years ago, and even more recently when I got back into training back in 2018, as I was approaching 50. That was my goal, hypertrophy. And I definitely look better than I do now. But the same thing, I wasn't as strong. You could do reps and sets for days, but the strength isn't going to be there. And it's surprising how different that style, the strength levels that you achieve with either one. So I'm pretty happy with the powerlifting aspect, but I do like the power building hybrid kind of training mode because I feel like it's a good mix of both, but it is difficult to kind of mix both in to do all the sets and reps of the hypertrophy part of it while still having the energy for the heavy lifts and really focusing on making progress in that regard. So not an easy balance, I know.
Right. And I think that's where a lot of people tend to lose their focus and their motivation, right? Because when you're trying to do something in more than one area at the same time, you typically don't see the best results for either one. It's kind of like, a jack of all trades, master of none. So the trade-off is, yes, you can get stronger, and yes, you will probably build some muscle, but you'll probably won't build as much muscle as if you were just doing hypertrophy training, and you probably won't get as strong as if you were just doing powerlifting. And a lot of people can't really wrap their minds around that.
Yeah.
So I think at the end of the day, it really just relates down to, what your main goal is. Cause I get that question a lot from people, like, how should I train? Or even like, how should I eat? Should I bulk or should I cut? And it really comes down to what your main overall goal is in terms of training and what you want out of it. And you can do it like walking the line in between, if you will, but just know that it's going to take more time and the results are going to obviously not be as easy to see overnight. So,
Yeah, exactly. So what have been some of your more memorable PRs in terms of powerlifting?
PRs for me that I'm really proud of is hitting a 601-pound squat in a USAPL competition. And I specifically want to call out USAPL because, again, posting a lot of stuff online, I get a lot of people who question certain things that I do in terms of my squat depth. I've been called on that before. But USAPL is known to be one of the stricter federations around here in the States. And I've never been red lighted for squat depth. So hitting a 600-pound squat at someone with my physique, which I would say is lanky. Mm-hmm. I'm just under 6'4", typically train and compete around 220 pounds. So skinnier than a lot of people and taller than a lot of people in my weight class. So being able to hit a squat like that is a pretty proud moment for me. Deadlift for me, best PR in the gym is 655. Best in competition, I believe, is 645. So proud of that as well, just because, again, I'm not a young gun. I'm getting older and I'm getting better. So I'm going to ride that train as long as I can. And then bench
when were those PRs?
So the one in meet, the 601 in a competition was in 2017, although I have hit a 605 training squat as recently as 3 or 4 months ago.
Okay.
Deadlift PR in a meet also probably 2 or 3 years ago. Recently hit 635 in training with some left in the tank. So excited to see where that is. And my bench press is just something that literally is just not gone anywhere since, God knows when. It's probably been around the same, floating somewhere between 320 to 340 for the past couple of years. That's kind of the one lift where I feel like putting on some extra weight would probably help me a lot. It doesn't help my case that I traditionally bench with what people would consider a flat back, so no real arch. And having longer arms and being lanky, as I've mentioned before, I have a long range of motion in that case. So bench has just been always kind of my weakest of the three, relatively speaking.
I know the bench has been something that's been troubling for me. But that's because of a shoulder injury or chest shoulder injury. Has there been anything like that for you that's kind of hindered your chest progress or your bench progress?
So I'd like to blame it on something. I don't think I can, but I'll try to make the story of it. So a couple of years ago, I think in 2015 or 2016, I was actually, oddly enough, washing my car and drying it. And I felt a little bit of an impingement right in my AC joint. And it literally kept me from benching for probably about 4 to 6 months. I went to physical therapy for it and all this. And my bench press never really recovered. It's close to where it was prior to that injury, but it's just one of those things that I think, coupled with my height, my grip, my lack of arch, maybe some other technique issues potentially, has held me back. I don't think it's not for lack of trying. I literally, every time that I train, I'm benching. So my frequency keeps climbing and I seem to respond well to that. I seem to do really well when it comes more to volume benching for reps, but when it comes to actually a 1 rep max, especially in a competition with pausing, it's just something that I haven't really gotten down yet. But yeah, no real injuries to speak of, lifting wise, at least. I saw you laughing because I'm sure you relate. It seems like now as we get older, the injuries come from the most ridiculous things. Like I tweaked my back loading the dishwasher or something like that.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's funny that you said that because I don't know if you saw my post on Instagram a week ago, literally injured my shoulder the same way, buffing out the compound, which is dry. I felt like a couple of clicks in my shoulder. And sure enough, like the rest of that night, my shoulder were killing me in pain. Still actually plagues me with my bench, which I've had that problem for a while. So that just exacerbated it. It kind of drives me nuts that something so simple and stupid actually can just kind of hinder your training. But that's part of why I train. So that way you can do everyday common things without actually injuring yourself and be capable of doing something like that, like lifting groceries and so on. But
Yep. It all comes back down to bracing and doing that. And I would be lying if I didn't say that I've gone out there to shovel snow here in the Northeast wearing one of my powerlifting belts to help brace.
that's wise. That's actually very wise. Well, how long do you intend to lift for?
Yeah, so this is interesting because one of my friends that I know who's also a very polarizing figure in the powerlifting world, Sean Noriega, he's really known for having a severe arch on his bench press. He recently put up an IG saying that, he didn't plan on powerlifting past 35. And I laughed because I didn't even start powerlifting till I was around 35. But to be honest, and I make the joke a lot, so maybe not to be honest, but I make the joke a lot to people is I'm just trying to outlive all my competition. And that's how I'm going to eventually be the best powerlifter. It's just outlive and outlift everybody because everyone else will be retired and I'll still be out there training. But I don't have any plans to stop. I like I've mentioned already, I feel like I'm getting smarter with my training, which has helped me, in fact, like I said, get to numbers that I haven't seen in a couple of years. And I'm doing so training less, but training smarter. So I have no intentions of stopping. I'll be that 70-year-old man in a singlet, trying to deadlift and do whatever still.
Cool. Well, I'll put them around to see that. Do you hope to get your boys started with training early?
Yeah, so maybe. Yeah. So I have two young sons, 4 and 2, and the 4-year-old right now is not taking naps. So he's in school 4 days a week. And on the 5th day, when he's not in school, he usually comes down here with me and my wife, because that's typically when we train, just when they go to nap or when they're at schools. And he's been very interested in climbing on the equipment and doing stuff, but he's been doing some really light work with her, even just like dumbbell step ups, things like that. Obviously, you don't want to push anything on him with anything, not even just training, but like sports or anything. Like if he shows interest and he wants to do it, I'm all there supporting him and trying to help him do the right thing. But if he says, I don't want to do this anymore, then that's no problem with me. Yeah. But I hope they do get into training, because as you can tell from looking behind me, I have a lot of crap. And when I'm gone, hopefully they're going to want it, because
they're not going to want for anything, that's for sure.
Someone's going to have to be able to move all this stuff out of the basement, right, I'm sure, at some point once I'm in the dirt. So
was that the one that the outtake on being impressed with your strength?
Yeah. So he already tells me that he's stronger than me, which is humbling, but he always tells me I'm stronger than all his other friends' dads and my brother-in-law. So that's good. He's a big supporter of me, which I can appreciate.
That's good. Yeah. All right. So let's turn to content creation. What motivated you to become a content creator back in the day?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, I first got into making online content probably back in like 2008, 2009, really before YouTube was a platform that was viable for a lot of people. I didn't even, I think, know about YouTube at that point. Yeah. But I was a member of the bodybuilding.com forum starting in like 1999. I remember like being a freshman in college in my dorm, being on the bodybuilding.com forums, talking to people who were my age, like Lane Norton, for example, someone I still keep in contact with here and there. But one of the big things on their forum was they had like a supplement thread where they'd have people who would represent supplement companies come on and basically look for people to try out supplements and then write a review on the forum and kind of log their progress, almost like a journal, a diary. And I was like, hey, I'm spending at this point in time, again, pre-real internet and a lot of information available in terms of online sources. I'm thinking I'm spending $200 a month on supplements that, come to find out, don't really do much for me, but I need to get in on this free stuff. Like, how do I do this? And I thought to myself, if I can separate and differentiate myself enough to show that I have more value than someone else trying to do the same thing. And in this case, it was, hey, not only will I log it on the forum, but I'll make a video review for it on YouTube, because there's no information. You don't know anything. So I'll start doing that. So that's what I started to do. I started doing supplement reviews, and it got to the point where I had a small audience at the time. It took a while to build up, but people would ask, all right, that's great, but what do you do for training? What do you do for eating? And that's how I started to get into it. And it snowballed until a couple of years after that, where I built a home gym, and I was like, hey, you know what? I just want to talk about some of this gym equipment that I have, because, for me, going through the process, gym equipment isn't something, for the most part, nice gym equipment isn't something you can just go to maybe like Sports Authority, which I don't think exists anymore, and see, like a nice power rack or a nice barbell. They'd have the standard weeder sets that you get at like Sears or something like that. But for a lot of the stuff, it's expensive, it's heavy, and you can't get your hands on it. So having a video or a person who has it and basically show you, hey, this is what it is, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, this is might be what you want to stay away from. I thought it'd be a good idea to start uploading reviews, and it just so happens that's the majority of my content these days, even though I still don't consider myself a reviewer. But that's how it kind of got started, and that's how we got to where we are today.
It's actually part of how I found you myself, back when the lockdown started. I had probably seen a few of your videos before that, but once I started doing my search to set up my own gym, that's when I came across you again and ended up subscribing. And I think it's an important factor nowadays where a lot of people are looking to do the same thing. So I definitely appreciate all the knowledge that you shared back then. And
don't sell yourself short. I mean, I watch all your videos, I comment on your videos, and I learn stuff. And I gave you kudos, in the Rep AB 5200 video for the washer hack that you showed, which I've seen a lot of people since take up. And I don't know if reps addressed that themselves yet or started doing it, but you've definitely played a role yourself. So don't sell yourself.
I appreciate that. You've gone through a few versions of your YouTube channel, right? Yeah. And why the change, and why, and did you find that most of your viewers actually followed you over to your new channel?
Yeah, sure. So when I started that channel initially, again, doing those supplement reviews at that time, so I think I started making videos, like I said, 2008, 2009-ish, right when, at least for me, I really discovered YouTube. It wasn't as openly accepted in the community, meaning that like the first couple of videos that I had put up and my girlfriend, now my wife at the time, found out about, she's like, what the hell is this? Who are you? This is embarrassing. And a lot of people at the time were like, that's weird that you're putting videos of yourself up, like talking about like workout stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why whenever I introduced myself on camera, or even my channel name was Campbell Fitness. That was my middle name. So I used Brandon Campbell because I didn't want to use my last name, because I didn't want people I knew to find my channel. And then eventually I got over it. And obviously YouTube and social media is a viable platform for everybody these days.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is when I tell people, they see the diamond now when it's on like YouTube or on Facebook or whatever, they're like, why are you using a fake name? Diamond's such a fake name. I'm like, that's my real name.
Right.
But yeah, so that's where we are now. And I wanted to get away from a brand. Like when I first started it, I had these intentions of other people that I watched at the time. Everyone was, XYZ fitness or XYZ training. So I kind of followed that mold. But now I'm in a place where my username and channel name is Basement Brandon, which I think is funny. My wife still does not find it very funny. But I don't want to be known as like I enjoy what I do, and I do get a monetary kickback from a lot of this stuff, but I still view myself as just an individual who likes to train and likes to talk about equipment and training and that stuff. So I didn't want to have like an official title where, I'm pushing a bunch of t-shirts or I'm pushing a bunch of training programs or whatever. It's just, I'm a dude in his basement who likes talking about gym stuff.
All right. What other content creators did you follow and why?
Yeah. So I think initially some of the first people I started watching, or Scooby. I don't know if you know who Scooby is. It's a really weird channel because Scooby gave a great information, but he was more kind of train at home, calisthenics, lift what you can. But he was also like a 60-year-old man in his home in Florida who would do all his videos shirtless and like a bucket Gilligan hat. And like, it was embarrassing to have people see you watch that. So I didn't really broadcast that out. I was like, they're like, what are you watching? This is really weird, because again, not many people would go on YouTube to watch training videos, but like him, Matt Ogus, some of those original people, and as I evolved and got into more like training stuff, obviously people like Pete Rubish have been really big for me. Ben Rice.
He was the guy in the basement, right?
Yeah.
Legendary deadlifts.
Yeah. He now owns a gym in Tennessee. But yeah, and I keep up with him now. And a lot of those people that I used to like, quote unquote, idolize or aspire to be like, I've become friends with them, which is a cool thing to see. Yeah. But these days, like literally, like I watch everybody. So I subscribe to channels that have like 5 subscribers just because they talk about gym stuff or they do gym tours or whatever the case may be. They talk about their training. That's just, it interests me. Yeah. So I have way too much time that I spend on YouTube in between, doing work, where I just have it playing in the background. I can comment on stuff. Lots of people. Obviously, I like the review channels, Coop with Garage Gym Reviews, Adam with Garage Gym Lab, Jake at Garage Gym Experiment. There's a bunch of people, too many to name. Not many basement channels, by the way. But yeah, tons of people I watch. So
Cool. I know content creation is practically a full-time gig in its own right. I've learned that myself, but it's not your real full-time gig, is it?
nope. So this is still a fun hobby for me, and I think that's one of the reasons why I've been able to be really consistent for the most part. I don't make as many videos as I used to. There was a time, I think in like 2013-ish, where I was making maybe 4 videos a week. These days, I'm good for a video a week, maybe 2 in some instances. But it's just something I do in my spare time when I have time. That's why it's still been really enjoyable.
Right.
Full-time work for me, I work in the IT field. I do sales and technical training. So I do all of our companies, new hire work, continuing education, creating materials for partner channel people. So I'm at a desk most of the time. So that's why I really like getting down in the basement to train, because I get to move around. But I still do training for my actual profession. So I make the joke in some instances in my training classes, like as soon as I get out of here, I'm going to go do my own training just because I love training so much in one form or another.
So you're going to have to return back to a work on site kind of scenario?
Yeah, so I'm very lucky in that I was working from home before the pandemic. And it gradually happened. I was going to the office 5 days a week for forever. I took a role with a company where my commute was over an hour each way. And I just got to the point where it's like, I'm burning 2 hours a day in a car where I'm not being productive. My company is very open to letting us do things. So I started working from home 1 day per week, and then 2 days per week, then 3 days, and then finally full-time outside of some travel, which I haven't been doing lately in the past 2 years due to everything and sites being shut down. But I've been working from home full time for probably the last 4 or 5 years. So when everything hit and people started like working from home, and some people started going crazy and like, how do you do this? I'm like, this is great for me. It's normal. Yeah. Nothing's different on my end.
Yeah, I've been fortunate to be in the same situation myself, but it definitely is convenient for the lifestyle that you and I kind of realize now with the training.
Yep. Yeah. And it's one of those things, right? Like I tell people who have trouble with it is just like, if they have trouble training at home, not everyone can do it.
Right.
But there are some things that you can do to help make sure that it's the best scenario for you. So I usually say, with a home gym, make sure it has its own dedicated space. So it's not like, also where you happen to hang your clothes, or where you have like, your TV, your desk or whatever, depending on what you can do. That way you can focus on it. Same thing from working from home. I actually work less at home, but I'm more productive because those hours that I spend are fully concentrated on what I'm doing.
Yeah. So what type of bump in viewers and subscribers did you see as a result of the lockdown?
Yeah, so big bump. So my channel right now, I think I have like 225,000 subs on YouTube. My channel initially had really, really good growth, before it became watered down with YouTube, with everyone having channels and everything like that. And when the algorithm was better, people always like to say it's all about the algorithm. I had really good growth up until about the time I took the current job that I'm in, which was about 9 years ago. And that's when I cut back on the time and the amount of content that I created. So again, I went from like 3 to 4 videos a week to once per week if I was lucky, just because at that point in time, my work focus shifted and I wanted to make sure that I was doing certain things professionally for my career and also for my personal life that would reap the benefits of the job and putting the hours in. And I saw a pretty significant drop off in the rate of channel growth, which was fine. I was okay with that. But with the pandemic, when it hit, everyone at that time finally realized that they needed videos on stall mats, on how to build a platform, on what equipment to buy. So I saw a big bump. So I think from the start of the pandemic, the first 6 months, I think I probably gained like, an additional 50,000 subscribers, which given the point I am now, you're talking about, like a 20 to 25% jump in growth in a short amount of time, when I've been pretty flat in terms of the growth curve. There's a pretty significant bump in terms of subscribers and views. So I can't complain about the pandemic hitting. It did well for me.
Well, it was definitely valuable content. And as I said earlier, because it was timely. So how awesome is it that your boy Omar has his own show on the History Channel now. Did you ever imagine anything like that?
So it's awesome to me to see Omar's growth and change